So in my last video, I talked about my approach to street photography and kind of what I look for when I'm out shooting. In today's video, I'm going to edit some of those photos that we took last time. I've got my iPad here, so let's get into it. So as photographers, a lot of what we want to try to do is capture the scene in camera so that we don't have to do a lot of edits afterwards. Me personally, I don't like to do a whole lot of editing. I don't do removals, I don't do touch-ups, I don't do any of that stuff when I'm editing my photos. If it was apparent in the scene, it's going to be apparent in my photo. That's kind of the approach that I take when I'm editing my photos. Now, if you'll remember, in my last video, I used my X100F to take these photos. If you're interested in how I set up that camera for my street photography, I have a guide on my website that walks through all of the settings that I use for that camera for street photography. Okay, let's dive into the first photo. So this photo here is a decently good photo. We have a subject that's center frame and we have a secondary subject that's in the background on the scooter. So all in all, decently composed. I shot this photo from the hip, so it's not going to be a perfect photo, but for what it is, it turned out pretty good. Now, as we can see from this photo, the colors really aren't adding anything to the scene. And that's a major thing that I look for when deciding whether to edit a photo as a black and white photo or a color photo. The distinction for me is the color in the scene helping to tell the story or is it distracting from the story? In this case, it's not necessarily distracting from the story, but it's definitely not helped tell the story. So, if we go into my presets, I have two black and white presets that I normally use. One is more of a lifted black and white preset, and the other one is a more high contrast black and white preset. So if we take a look at the first one, this is more my lifted blacks one. This one, I like the way that it looks. It's kind of a soft image. I like the way that the tones are playing with each other. I think this looks pretty good. But if we look at the hard black and white, this one introduces a lot of contrast. I think that the texture in the trees in the background is a little distracting. So yeah, I think we're gonna go with the first one. So we'll hit done there. We'll go into light. I'm gonna just dial back the exposure just a touch. I think that looks pretty good right there. And I think that this foreground element is a little distracting here. So what I am gonna do is I'm gonna add a linear gradient, flip that around, bring that back, bring the exposure down just a touch. And that's really it. That's the extent of my editing when looking at black and white photos. Moving on to the next one, we have this image here. I think this is a pretty good image. It's just two people talking. This was obviously a hip fire shot because it's not a level image and it's really hard to get your camera level when you're shooting from the hip. But all in all, I think this is a good image. I think that the colors here are actually helping to tell the story, especially the light on the left-hand side of the frame. I think that if we get that a little more orange, it'll add a lot to the image. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten the image because it wasn't straightened. And then we're going to come in here. Based on the Fujifilm recipe that I was using for these images, I really tend to like Python a lot, but I'll go through all of my presets just so you can see what they look like. The first one here is definitely my most film-like look. It has more of a greener tint to it. It's very high grain. It looks pretty good in this image, but I think that we can do better. My golden preset, this one I normally only use for golden hour because it really accentuates the yellows and the oranges in the image. Doesn't look too great here. Java, I know that it's going to be pretty washed out here. Of course, if I bring the exposure down a bit, it looks okay, but it really is just kind of a flat color profile that I have there. PySpark looks okay. Sequel is really bringing up the shadows a little more, which is nice. Tensor is definitely a different color tone. It also looks pretty good. But of course, Python, I know, is the one that I want to go with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, bring the light down just a touch. And color, I'm going to warm it up just a little bit just to bring those oranges up a little more. All right, that looks all right. I'm going to come into my color mix, come down to orange. I want to bring the luminance of the oranges down a little bit. And then my yellows, I want to bring those a little more to the orange and bring those down just a touch, just to make the image overall warmer. I'll warm it up just a little more. All right, come back into exposure and bring it down. So we're trying to get more of a silhouette sort of thing on these two subjects here. Bring that out. And yeah, that's the before and that's the after. I think it looks a lot nicer now. Next image. This image I like a whole lot, but the greens are a really big part of this image, so that's obviously something that we're going to want to bring out. Again, because of the recipe that I was using, I'm going to want to go with Python here. I want to bring the exposure down just a touch. Bring my temperature a little warmer. That looks nice. Come to color mix. I always get those two mixed up. I want to bring my greens, bring the saturation up just a touch. Bring the luminance up. Bring my yellows a little more to the green. I just want to bring those down. I want to bring my oranges down just a little bit. Okay, maybe we can tint it just a little more green just because there is so much green in this image. And we'll bring the temperature up. That looks about good. So here we have before and after. Next image. All right, so this one here, the idea with this image here is that we have a huge light source in the center of the frame. And so we really want to have that light kind of spill into the frame more, but then we want to reduce any of the areas where there is no light so that it's not as distracting. So again, we're going to come in here. I like the colors in this scene, so obviously it's going to be a color image. We'll select Python because I know that's what I'm going to want to use. And we're going to bring the exposure up quite a bit, just so that the light around the frame of the doorway really opens up. That looks all right. Come to our color, maybe we want to warm it up just a little bit. That looks okay. All right, and then I do want to come in here and add a linear gradient along the bottom, just so we can kind of get some of this distraction out of the way. Bring that down. I think that really accentuates the light source coming in the center of the frame. And that's it. Now I might crop in just a little bit, somewhere around there. And yeah, that's it. We can see the before and the after. So again, my editing process is pretty basic. It's really just me throwing on presets onto my images. But that's mainly because I try to capture a lot of what I want out of the image in camera itself, which is either the contrast of the image, certain colors, definitely getting my exposure dialed in so I don't have to alter the exposure too much when I'm editing. And these are all things that you'll learn as you start or continue your photography process, especially as you're finding your style within the genre. Again, all of my presets are available on my website. Link is down below if you're interested in purchasing them. I really appreciate it. It helps me and this channel out a lot. Also, if you have an X100F or X100V and you'd like to know how I set up my camera, I have a guide on my website that explains all of the settings, the function buttons, everything that I use to use that camera for street photography. Again, link to my website is down below. So I hope this was informative, if not entertaining. And as always, thanks for watching, happy shooting, and I'll see you next time.